Fire Urban Meyer. Fire him now, Chet.
It has a beautiful ring to it.
Urban Meyer. That is the new title of our show. We're no longer the brothers of Dynasty. We're the brothers of get Urban Meyer the fuck out of Jacksonville.
We are the three advocates for removing shit coaches from the league.
Yeah.
What an opener. Wow.
Coming in with fire,
Love
baby. This is what we're doing.
Do you remember the account FireJoeMorgan.com? It was that a website. Do you remember that?
No, I don't remember that.
It was run by Michael Schur, who wrote on The Office and then Parks and Rec. Yeah. Yeah, he ran that account. We should start a Fire Urban Meyer. I think it's time for that website to exist.
That's
true. It probably already
exists.
But...
Yeah, can we get that URL? Let's check out it.
Get that
there.
I'm on GoDaddy right now. And,
We should be sitting on that from the beginning of the season, as if like it wasn't like a popular thing. Be like, oh, this guy's gonna need to leave. We should have known from the summer that would be a coveted URL.
Well, no, this is still the Brothers of Dynasty, though. I'm your host, Josh Christensen, joined as always by my two brothers, Jay and Andrew. Jay, what are you drinking today?
I'm drinking, this is a Long Trail Brewing. This is not an IPA this week. This is a holiday ale called Hibernator. It's a Vermont classic.
Ooh.
It's really good. The holiday ales, they're in season now. I like that a little bit. Not too spicy.
A little winter spice, a little nutmeg.
None of that. This is just like a I don't know, like a brown ale basically, but good. I don't want the ones with like that taste like gingerbread. That's junk. That's too sweet. Get that out of here.
Yeah, maybe a little too sweet, but I do love a little nutmeg. Does anyone remember the Colbert Report Christmas special? This was before John Legend blew up, but John Legend wrote a song and
he was like on his way up.
Yeah, he was on his way up, but it was before he really blew up. And that's the moment I became a big fan of John Legend.
Nice. When America fell
this guy has got it with this nutmeg song.
That's great.
It was really the precursor to all of you. Andrew, what are you drinking tonight?
I am drinking the favorite of the pod, Celebration.
I know that one.
Fresh up. Yeah. Are you familiar, Jay?
It's in the fridge. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I thought.
Oh, all right. Okay, good. It's in the fridge. It's great. You can get some a little later.
That's how you start packing a fridge, beer fridge. You got to start with Celebration.
Yeah, mostly for the color of the can, mostly. You gotta get some red in there and a little green can of something, maybe some Heineken. Yeah, real Christmas colors in your fridge. It's all about that.
There you go. Get the red Celebration. All you just need is Red Stripe and Heineken, and then you have a Christmas themed fridge
and possibly skunked beer, but you know.
Yeah, possibly. Do they make Red Stripe anymore?
This is aesthetic. 50-50. It's not. It's
hooray beer.
Oh, they make that. Yeah. I haven't had a Red Stripe since college.
Those little smushed bottles.
No, they're good. They're good. It's fine. Anyways, what am I drinking, you ask? I've got a nice holiday-colored Aperol Spritz, baby. They drink them in summer, but it looks like Christmas.
It's a winter drink. It's the drink of the summer, the winter.
It's an all year long.
The spring.
It's an evergreen drink, if you will.
It's the Adrian Peterson of cocktails. All day, baby. You can drink all day.
You can score from the one and not much else.
No, like circa 2012.
This cocktail is what you'd call washed up. Very, very well might be. Anyways, on today's episode, we should talk about some football. But before we do, I remembered to say it this time, Jay, our little plug there for the Fantasy Football Collective. So the Brothers of Dynasty is part of the Fantasy Football Collective network of podcasts. You can find the Fantasy Football Collective at FF_collective. That's collective with a K. For other great content and podcasts like the Fantasy Nightcap, the Fantasy Boardroom, and Collective Knowledge. And I can't wait until the offseason when I'm sure we'll all have some great 2022 class rookie talk, which I'm excited for. That's going to be fun. It's a really interesting class to dive into. It's one of those actually last year was fun to jump into.
but it was pretty clear what the players were and how they were going to shake out.
So chalk.
It really was, though. Like, it was pretty clear who the players were and where they should more or less go. This year, all bets are out the window. There's no consensus this year. It's going to be a lot of fun to dive into these rookies. And so stick around to this Brothers of Dynasty feed. Smash subscribe on this. Follow our Twitter page at Bros of Dynasty for great off-season rookie content and draft content, because that's when we hit our stride. We got to hit it at some point, right, guys?
This is just warm-ups right here. This is stretching. We're doing some light sprints right now, and then
Jay's limbering up. Yeah,
exactly.
Takes a lot of stretching to hit full stride. I'll tell you that.
Gotta get those hammies loose, baby.
We're training for the combine. We're gonna be doing drills along with the 2022 rookie class.
Yeah, I'm going to be the John Ross of the combine this year. Not in terms of how fast I run, but in how injured I get when I run.
The preceding injuries. Of course,
Process over results. That's what I'm about.
You gave it all.
You got to burn out those hammies when you're doing a 40-yard dash. You're not doing it right. Anyways, you should get to some football. So obviously we're reacting to week 14 in the NFL, and then we're going to talk about the potential QB carousel this off season. There are anywhere from, I would say conservatively, 7 or 8 teams, all the way up to like 12 or 13 teams this season that could be recycling quarterbacks or moving on from their current quarterbacks, drafting a quarterback. There could be a lot of chaos at that position. And it's not unprecedented, because I believe last season we ended up with 13 new starters across the league. I think 13 teams ended up with new starters between draft picks, trades, and free agent acquisitions. And it could be much the same this season as well. So we'll get into that, but we are going to start with our reactions to some storylines from week 14. And for that, we're going to start. Jay, what is your takeaway from this past week?
Oh, my takeaway? Well, first of all, the
fire Urban Meyer.
I saved that for Josh. I mean, if he wants to, I don't know what else do you want to say about that.
I don't know what else there is to say. I mean, it's a lot.
I mean, it's embarrassing at this point. I mean,
it's an embarrassment.
I just want to talk about Justin Herbert's arm for the rest of the show.
Like the actual arm, not his use of it. It's just,
not the fantasy points.
Can I just say, before you even go up into that, my physical reaction while he was doing that, before he even made the throw, I saw him start to roll up, wind down. You could feel what was coming, and I was just like, oh, like literally, like in my chair, getting up in anticipation. Go on, Jay, though.
I mean, the only thing I wish was that Gus Johnson was on the call for that, because I needed just someone to just pass out while, oh my God, just freak out, wow, and just lose their mind. Because I mean, on the run, 65 yard,
in the air,
cannon, just a complete rope. On the run. I mean, he set himself for a second. I mean, he 1 sec, poof, it was crazy. And it just highlights not that it's fantasy relevant. It was fantasy relevant for the points that play scored. But man, over the past, since week 11, really has been firing on all cylinders. Now he's thrown 30 touchdown passes his first 2 seasons. He's eclipsed that. He still has games to go here.
Yeah,
I mean, this is some crazy territory he's getting into for a guy who's only in his second year, and once again wasn't even supposed to start at the beginning of last year. He took the injury to Tyrod Taylor. He was the consensus third behind Tua and Burrow, and now he's. I mean, we've been talking about it. I think there's no problem with having him at number 1 for dynasty rankings for quarterback. I don't know what else you have to do. I mean, Patrick Mahomes scored 50 in his redshirt, second season there, but this guy's doing once again other unprecedented things in terms of touchdowns. He's athletic. He showed it on that play just to be able to scramble. Like, it's not like he's going to be Josh Allen rusher, but the guy's athletic. He could kind of score with his legs if he needed to, but he's got that cannon arm where, man, this is a guy that you can build around. Just plug him. Like, if you have him in Dynasty, you're set for years in my mind.
15 years. Yeah, you're done.
Clear at the top there. He's sitting right now at third in average points for the quarterback position, only behind Allen and Brady, but it's really pretty close there. He's a clear upper echelon quarterback, and just that play was one of my favorite plays of the year that I've seen in terms of highlights.
Yeah.
It's just exactly a kind of personifies what he brings to the table.
It was unreal. It was absolutely unreal watching that play. And honestly, the whole game, he just like could not be stopped by granted it was the New York Giants. But that defense can be frisky.
Good defense. And he didn't have his best receiver. He didn't have his security blanket.
No, he didn't have Keenan Allen. That's what makes it impressive. He was doing it to Jalen Guyton and Mike Williams and Donald Parham and Jared Cook.
Josh Palmer.
Josh Palmer actually had a nice game too.
Touchdown. Like just kind of nice spread around all the guys he's got.
Yeah, it's just he seems like, and it's not even just like the deep ball. Obviously, his deep ball accuracy. One, he's completed more in the past 2 years since he came into the league. He's completed more 50-plus yard passes than any other quarterback in the league. So he does that at an elite level, which from a fantasy perspective, obviously you love, because every time he throws a 50-plus yard, catch, that's 2 points plus whatever the touchdown is. If he scores a touchdown on that, you get those big chunk plays that rack up those yards. But also like in the underneath stuff and the intermediary things, like some of the stuff that he does to manipulate safeties, to pump fake, to use his eyes, and it's just like it's beyond his years. Like it really cannot be understated just how amazing Justin Herbert has been since he got into the league. And I think I texted you guys and I tweeted this out, and I was just like, yeah, Justin Herbert's my number one dynasty QB. Yeah, it's still in a tier. I get it. I understand that there's still Kyler, there's still Josh Allen, there's still Patrick Mahomes, there's still Lamar Jackson, there's still these other guys, and I'm fine with anything. But for me, like if I'm at the 101 in a super flex startup draft, I'm taking Justin Herbert just because he's terrific. I don't think you can go wrong with it, and I just love him. I just think he's great. I just am just a fan. And it's like you can't separate that from it as well. And that throw was just unreal. To get back to the point, like that was ridiculous. It was ridiculous. It was absolutely ridiculous. Andrew, anything to add there?
Yeah, no, I think you guys have said it all. And I mean, we've shown a lot of love for Justin Herbert, but he's just one of those players that I'm going to be excited to see how things continue to progress with him, because he already looks so fantastic, and it'll great to see him continue to develop, see him in the remainder of this season with Keenan Allen coming back, and how he kind of closes things out. And we'll see how this team drafts to continue to put weapons around him, because like we said, like using kind of some of those players like the Jalen Guytons, it seems like he can kind of get it done with like whatever weapons are available to him. But like you start getting him some other like big like players to work with. It'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see.
God, I would love them to get. I gotta bring up this comment here.
Robert
Freer. Paul.
Whatever your real name is.
Better at what?
Mustache growing?
Like at chess? Like is definitely like where did they face each other in? Like,
I don't know. Better at CrossFit.
What's the context? Okay, yeah.
Better at being a certified douche, bro.
Better at tossing empty kegs off of a balcony.
Definitely that. Yeah.
Better at shotgunning Bud Heavy on a Saturday night on the quad. I don't know what is meant you better at. A lot of those things, probably. Perfectly great person. I obviously love Gardner Minshew. Think he's a great person. Never said anything bad about him in my life. No, he's a terrible person.
Is he a great person?
Let's move on to another storyline. Andrew, what's the storyline of the week for you?
I'm going to talk a little bit about George Kittle and rest of the season. Since George Kittle came back from his injury around week 9, he has by far been the tight end one. He is 144 fantasy points since then, which puts him at almost 30 points over the next person, Mark Andrews, averaging almost 5 points more than him per game. These last 2 games in particular, both over 40 in standard PPR. He only had one bad game in the mix there, which against the Vikings, he kind of pulled up like a 1 reception performance, which was not awesome. But that was also a game where like it was a big Debo performance. I think Elijah Mitchell was really in the mix, like a lot of running. I mentioned Debo. I think Debo, that was another game where, like this week, I think he had more rush attempts than he had receptions. He did, just kind of like a weird game script. So I'm going to chalk that one up as an outlier. But otherwise, George Kittle has been lights out since he came back, and he is my tight end 1 down the stretch. And I think bringing light to an otherwise dreary tight end position that we've seen this year.
I think it's basically him and Mark Andrews down the stretch. Darren Waller's a little banged up. Obviously, Kelsey's still there. Kelsey's still producing. So you have him in there, and then outside of that, it's just kind of a mix of a bunch of guys.
You get Gronk when healthy is
Gronk when healthy has been really, really good. I mean, I still think you get serviceable games out of Kyle Pitts. Dawson Knox has been good, but honestly,
touchdowns like make him viable.
But it's just like it's Kittle and Andrews, and then a big drop off. Kittle's Andrew and Kelsey, and then a big drop off from there. Rest of season. I mean, just going through this, I'm going to quickly run through like since he returned from injury, what he's done. 6 for 101 and a touchdown, 5 for 50 and a touchdown, 4 for 34 and a touchdown. That
touchdown
Vikings
in
game,
pretty much every game except for that Vikings game.
That Vikings game, 1 for 13, weird game there. 9 for 181 and 2 touchdowns, 13 for 151 and a touchdown. That is unreal, like production from a tight end at that point. One, like the touchdown equity, which just he didn't have one until that point in the year. I think he didn't have one until, that was his first touchdown was November 7th. He didn't have any early on in the season, but he's just been absolutely terrific. One of the best players in fantasy since he returned, and it doesn't show any signs of stopping. But we've brought some corn for popping. Happy holidays, everybody.
He like won that game for him too, really. I mean, Ayuk was pretty good too, but man, some of the catches that Kittle made in that game too. The
one in particular,
it didn't seem like he should be able to reach that one, but he did, and he, just grabbed, didn't have any trouble making that catch. I mean, man, just
Kittle not necessarily like rated for his like his athleticism in that sense, more for his like his physicality, his power, his like tenacious run, his route running as well, his blocking, very much like I haven't seen it. Like obviously we were Patriots fans growing up, all of us, we saw prime Gronk. I've never seen anyone since Gronkowski play like George Kittle. It's just such a rare breed of tight end to be able to do all of that so well. It's really remarkable to watch. I mean, because even as wonderful as Kelsey is, as wonderful as Waller is, they don't do the stuff that Kittle and Gronk do. They just don't. It's really so fun to watch.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. And those other guys make their bread and butter being pass catchers. But yeah, like you said, Kittle does it all. And there's no one else like him. So
no, absolutely not. I mean, just like to throw this out, I know this is kind of off the top of my head right now, but like other than Kittle coming on like this right now, like what other players are you thinking are like going to win people championships towards the end of the year? Obviously, Jonathan Taylor and Cooper Kupp aside, we know those guys, but like guys that are coming on hot right now, any other names that stick out to you of guys who you think are going to win some championships for people?
I would say James Conner would be in the mix, but he's having an MRI on his ankle. He hurt at the very end of the game.
I saw him
night.
on the ground at the end, but then I saw him walking on the sideline. So I should have followed.
Although Chase Edmonds is coming back, but man, like that guy is crushing like Fournette, but he's been doing it the whole year. I don't know about like someone coming on now, maybe Javonte Williams, but it's still 50-50 with Gordon. They were both crushed this week, so it's sort of like maybe you're gonna have to deal with that going forward. But
maybe some of the players that you could have, like we've talked about how quickly some of the rookies came on, like a Waddle. I feel like is someone you probably could have gotten at some point. Like I could see him winning some seat, like some of those rookie players. They're not necessarily like just getting hot now. But if you were
Jalen Waddle sticks out to me as a guy who I think is going to be an important
Renfro,
piece.
For God's sakes.
Hunter Renfro. Yeah, I think he's wide receiver 14 on the season now. 13 or 14.
He's like top 5 probably because he's crushed the last few weeks. Like just
it's unreal.
He's been like double-digit targets every game. So
I still have up my week 9 through 14 filter on. In that time frame, Renfro is number 3.
Yeah.
So, I mean, maybe not appropriate there, but like that is sort of like the momentum of him is in like he is a top 3 wide receiver over the past 6 weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. He's been absolutely terrific. Yeah, those guys would definitely come to mind for me as well. Continuing on with some storylines, I just want to recap some injuries to keep your eye on. Lamar Jackson had an ankle sprain. I think I would monitor his status throughout the week, but that team being on the cusp of the playoffs, I would expect him, if he can go, will go. But it seems that he is dealing with a low lateral ankle sprain, which could make him miss at least a week, but we'll see at that point. We also have, there's a number of COVID outbreaks on there. 37 people tested positive. A lot of the Cleveland Browns, a lot of the Rams, OBJ amongst them, a number of other players. Like, I think Myles Gaskin is right now on the reserve COVID list, so check that out. I won't run through all of those there. Austin Eckler, who's on a short week, did have an ankle sprain, re-aggravated an ankle sprain. Keep an eye on his status. He's day-to-day. Josh Allen's also day-to-day with, I believe that's an ankle sprain as well. So, again, that's another player who, if he can go, will go. But other than that, Jay already mentioned the MRI on the ankle that's happening for James Conner, and I think that's about it for significant injuries that are concerning going into this week in terms of your fantasy playoff push for those of you who made the playoffs and have first-round matchups this week. So keep monitoring those pretty significant players on there if you have them on your roster. Any other quick hits on week 14 storylines that we want to touch on before we jump into our QB carousel talk?
No, I was going to say, what did you want to talk about? Something about Meyer?
Fire Urban Meyer. I can't even overstate it enough. It's a disastrous situation in Jacksonville. That team's an absolute mess. Like, it's not putting Trevor Lawrence in a position to succeed. It's like everything around that is ridiculous. After the Tom Pelissero story came out about the nonsense that Urban Meyer's been on there, just like abusive to staff members, just petty and unable to take consequences. Everything that I was talking about last week in terms of like fallacies of what makes good leadership possibilities. Urban Meyer is a bad leader. He is a narcissist who is unfit to be a leader in an organization. He does not take responsibility. He's abusive to his staff members. He's petty for people who criticize him. He is unfit to be an NFL coach. He is unfit to be a leader at any level, and he needs to be out of football yesterday. And he honestly should have never been hired to begin with, going back into his career of like covering up domestic abuse and other criminal activity by players and staff members of his at previous spots.
even just right after he was hired as coach, hiring a racist, hiring a straight up abusive racist in Chris Doyle and that whole thing, which doing that and not understanding why that's a problem should have been disqualifying for Urban Meyer to begin with. He's gone throughout this season. He's been a terrible coach. He's been a terrible manager in any sort of workplace. And Shad Khan would be stupid not to fire him today, let alone in the offseason after this is over. It is a bad decision to leave this man in charge of anything. He is a bad person with bad leadership skills and is unfit to be an NFL coach. Fire Urban Meyer, and let's all give him the lack of respect he deserves, because he does not deserve our respect. Urban Meyer is a bad person.
Yeah, that guy
I'm serious. So, like,
his
career, he is not a good person. He should not be revered as a coach. He should not be talked about with any sort of reference whatsoever. He's done a lot of bullshit in his life that's not just recruiting violations. It's honest to God shit that hurts people around him. Even people like dismissing the story of like calling his assistant coaches losers as something that's just a silly sort of thing.
Garbage,
No. These are people who work for him. These are people's careers depend on him. And he's treating them like that. That is absolute fucking bullshit. Like, look in the fucking mirror.
Yeah.
You're the head coach. The buck stops with you. Get the fuck out of here. Next.
Yeah, no,
anyway.
that was so ridiculous because when I read that story of it's like lining up, being like I'm a winner, and it'd be like all my assistant coaches are losers, and I'm gonna make them stand here and defend their record as if I didn't hire them myself, knowing their resumes and records. It's like these were handpicked by you. So again, if you're saying they're losers, it's like you're a loser for picking. It's all that, like, but that's rationale.
Yeah.
Like, he's not being.
No, it's rationale, and it's also like you haven't done fucking shit in the NFL.
He recruited well in college because like he was on Florida, and you can get like that's
and Ohio State, and he got lucky
like,
enough
whoa,
to
man.
You got lucky enough
all
to
the
get
best
Alex
athletes
Smith
in the country. Oh, thank you. Like, I mean, come on. Like,
yeah.
And he had to leave each one of those places
Yeah.
in quasi-disgrace
Quickly.
because he fucked up and did stuff like cover up domestic abuse and shit like that.
Yeah,
Like,
I
fuck
mean, he's always
Urban
been
Meyer.
garbage. I mean, he'll probably get hired by a studio show, which is bullshit too. So it's like,
Oh, that's bullshit
like,
too.
I
Any
don't
studio
understand
and
this
company who
crap.
hires Urban Meyer, it should get out of here. Get the fuck out of here.
Let's move on to more positive things. He sucks. Like I can't even believe we have to like, I don't know. I can't believe he's like burying like Trevor Lawrence's career too.
No,
It's like he's just like destroyed that whole team.
Yeah, I mean that's
That's like-
the other thing around there in terms of fantasy implications. Obviously, like James Robinson. Like,
should be.
He benches James Robinson after fumbling. Trevor Lawrence then comes down and is like, no, he should be on the field. He's one of our best playmakers. He's their only playmaker on offense. Let's be clear. The playmakers around Trevor Lawrence are not good. And then he puts him out there for 60-something% of the snaps out there and gives him 6 carries out there. Leaves Trevor Lawrence alone on an island out there in some like fucking petty display of crippled masculinity or whatever the fuck Urban Meyer was doing. And meanwhile, like it was a bad game for Trevor Lawrence, but it's one of those things where like I don't blame Trevor Lawrence, and this is why like he's still an elite talent, and it sucks that he's being wasted away for this first year because of Urban Meyer, because there was progression in the early part of the season, and then clearly stuff started falling apart for that franchise, and Trevor Lawrence's development has crumbled since then. There is an issue with Trevor Lawrence in terms of he keeps trying to force throws, but I almost don't blame him for that because his receivers can't separate. The passing concepts are a mess. Like, people don't know what they're doing. I mean, like, in this last game, you had receivers running into each other down the field. There's no one open on these things. And beyond that, he's not establishing a run game. So, like, the first interception this past game for Trevor Lawrence, it bounced off of Laviska Shenault's hands and into another person's arms. Not his fault. The second one, he didn't see I think a linebacker who dropped out into coverage on the line. And I also don't blame Trevor Lawrence for that completely because they just stopped running the ball. So they had they were just rushing 4 at most. at that point, which the line couldn't protect because they didn't even pretend to run the ball. So then he had no one open for the rest of the game. So it's just like at this point, like withhold all judgment on Trevor Lawrence and his skill set until something better happens in the coaching scheme for him, because it's just been an absolute disaster. Like, what the fuck is he supposed to do? What the fuck is James Robinson supposed to do? What is anyone supposed to do on that team with the way that this coaching staff has been? Because Urban Meyer's more concerned about people respecting his fucking authority or something versus being a good coach. Because you know what? Ultimately, it's not about, as a coach of a team, it's not about you. You're standing on the sidelines. It's not about you, Urban Meyer. Get the fuck out of here. You're not a winner. You're on the Jacksonville Jaguars. You're the same as everyone else. Like, you're a loser until proven otherwise on the Jacksonville Jaguars. So fucking try to win a game instead of trying to assert your fucking whatever bullshit, narcissistic, toxic masculinity nonsense Urban Meyer has going on. Fuck that guy. And fuck everything about that situation. Like, it's honestly, like, ridiculous at this point. It's so stupid. It's so stupid.
It's bad.
And it's like,
I
gotta stop. We gotta move on.
It's like, can we get away from breaking down your staff, your players, and making weird like inferences to like weeding out sources from your administration? Like, I love that.
Yeah, Jesus Christ.
But it feels funny that, like, compared to that, Justin Fields in Chicago seems like a good situation. So
comparatively,
but at least even in that one that we would probably agree is a bad situation, it's like that's the one where you're like, yeah, I see him making mistakes, I see bad things, but like you can still at least see those bright spots that we talk about wanting to see. You know, he makes some really nice play, and then all of a sudden he gets picked off by like a defense. Like, I think he almost threw two pick sixes. There was one, but like, yeah, in the end, like the same
one
guy
pick six is fine
almost jumped his route like again. Like, so it's like the game's faster. It's like you're getting used to.
That's what we call a Wentz special.
Yeah, but these
I think
are
it's
the
called
things we can kind of live with
Shaw
in development, though. If they're showing some sort of sign, like Trevor Lawrence, it's just a bummer because it would just seeing zero. It's just bad and more bad. So
yeah, it's just, especially in the past few weeks, because there was progression. Like, he started off the season, he was forcing a lot of balls, he was making some interceptions, and then he started to limit the mistakes, and he really was pretty good, particularly I think in that Dolphins game, which they ended up winning, I believe, right? And they kind of came back, and there were some drives. Yeah, the London game.
Yeah,
and they put some things together, and he had some really nice drives. They were using like the read option, and he was looking good in the running game in that two-man game with James Robinson. It was a great tandem. He was hitting his receivers. He had some nice throws, and he still has nice throws from time to time. And then everything for that franchise just across the board just went downhill. And it's just clearly things are not right there. But that's enough about Jacksonville.
Call it.
And everything like that. Let's talk about some QBs. Let's talk about
do Robert Freer's question in the chat. We could before we get off into the QB.
Is there a chat going on?
If Hopkins is hurt, do I play Kirk or AJ Green?
I always lean towards Kirk when Hopkins is out. I feel like Kirk is the one who benefits the most.
That's true. I think he has the highest
past
ceiling.
Games, but I mean, I don't think it's like a slam dunk. I think it's still a little bit. I would lean slightly Kirk, but AJ Green he played well last night.
Yeah, he showed some life in last night's game. Like, I think there was like one particular play where he like broke some, like actually busted a move and like really faked out some guys. So I'm like, that was interesting.
Still do some things. Yeah. It's just
it's like, oh, that's AJ Green.
I just think like Hopkins' game is like ball, like he's your possession receiver more like Keenan, where like he's getting the targets and things like that. I just think Kirk kind of falls into that when Hopkins is out, where Green's just a little bit different at this stage of his career. But you know, it's still sort of like a flip a coin situation. It's not like a clear guy there. I lean slightly Kirk just for the role I think he'll have. But
yeah, Yeah, I guess that's good. I mean, I honestly am like not super high on either of them. I think it's going to be really spread out. Like honestly, if I think of the pass catcher, that's what I was gonna say. I think of the pass catchers who I think I'd want to start if I had to choose any of them. I think it's Ertz, honestly, like in that kind of possession role, high volume thing. Like Kirk, I like, but he's not a super high volume player. He's really a down the field guy, explosive, has a high ceiling, and that's great. If you want to kind of hit a home run, I think it's Kirk. But if you want to have a high floor, I think it's Ertz. And I think AJ Green just does what AJ Green does on that team. I don't think his role really changes.
Yeah, Green's Bucks, if you look for the last several games, was pretty bad, and then he kind of came alive last night. So, a couple like twos in the mid. So, but but these guys are viable this week just because if the COVID really is, making guys miss games, which sometimes they can come back depending on their vaccination status and all that. But there's going to be guys out this week, so you're going to be diving into this depth of receiver where you're going to have to play these guys. So Green's probably viable this weekend, especially if Hopkins is out, depending on if you've lost some guys to COVID.
Yeah, no, you're right. Fire Urban Meyer, right. Let's move on.
In all stories.
It's like Roll Tide, Fire Urban Meyer. Roll Tide. Also, actually, before we move on, some for our Debbie fans and certainly out there.
All the
some
Debbie
transfer portal news out there, or for people
exciting.
who have 2023 picks and really care about that. Spencer Rattler, now a South Carolina Gamecock. He's moving over there after a pretty disastrous season in Oklahoma with Caleb Williams taking over, but a chance to kind of revive his draft stock in South Carolina, in the SEC, gets to play against some interesting competition. We'll be interested to see what happens with Spencer Rattler there. Also, my favorite transfer move of the offseason, Jameer Gibbs goes from Georgia Tech to Alabama.
It's almost
baby.
not fair. I mean,
it's not fair. Jameer Gibbs at
like
one
of
was
the top
terrific in Georgia
three
Tech.
running backs from that class, and he's going.
Oh yeah. I would say I think he's the clear number 2 to Bijan right now going into this year, and he's going to get to play in Alabama in that scheme. I'm excited to watch Jameer Gibbs. Next year.
People get drafted from Alabama. I don't know if you've heard.
I don't know if you know this, but they've
name a few I don't recall.
Landon Dickerson, noted interior lineman.
Yes.
Greg McElroy, heralded quarterback.
Yeah, exactly. AJ McCarron,
now in the booth for.
AJ McCarron. I'll say no more.
Solid backup quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah.
just some solid.
Cam
pros.
Sims, wide receiver, had a nice touchdown this weekend.
There we go. Oh my God, that's gonna be fun. And then also Tank Bigsby has entered the transfer portal.
Yeah, that'll be wild. Where's he
Zach
going?
Evans. Oh, I don't know where Tank's going. Also, Jalen Berger from Wisconsin, another 2023 eligible.
Oh yeah, Berger.
He went from Wisconsin to Michigan State, which is kind of interesting. Taking over for Kenneth Walker there. That's a good
turning
scheme.
into like a pro sports league with like just free agent. It's like free agent.
Yeah,
you know.
It's interesting.
I mean, Quinn Ewers committed to Texas. Decommitted to Texas, went to Ohio State to sign a $1.4 million NIL deal, and now is transferred back to Texas because they'll probably start this year for them.
Oh yeah,
because CJ Stroud.
Yeah.
He's not going to start. There's too many guys at Ohio.
No, it's CJ Stroud and McCord there. But Stroud was a Heisman finalist. Started off a little rocky this year, but man, could not have been better down the stretch for Ohio State. So he's locked in next year. So a lot of interesting stuff happening in the college ranks. I mean, I'm excited for the 2023 class. I know everyone says that, but there's some really, really interesting stuff happening, particularly at running back and quarterback.
Now, is there a reason why Tank Bigsby would be transferring from Auburn?
That team's kind of fallen apart.
Is it
Bo
just
Nix is gone.
Because I was going to say, I mean, a lot of times people transfer for like better opportunity, like within like
I don't know. I think
it's his job, like
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure. I mean, they had
rotated in Hunter a lot this year. Maybe he wants like a bigger
more
share.
of his own.
I don't know, like, or you want to showcase, especially your last year. Maybe he thinks he can showcase for the NFL in another spot.
And maybe it was like, I don't know if they're
being alongside Michael Carter there. So
yeah, I know. He was kind of a late breakout, but I think Auburn kind of had some rough like O-line play. I think he's kind of going on to try to find a place that can feature him better and he can rank up his stats, because he kind of had a down year in terms of efficiency. And I don't know necessarily. I think he's still a talented guy. It's why I think, like, honestly, like in terms of going into next year, obviously this is going to change a ton, but like he's now like my fourth running back in the 2023 class behind
those other guys,
Bijan Robinson, Gibbs, and Zach Evans, who also entered the transfer portal. TCU, their coach left. So that makes sense. Like that happens a lot of the times when
it's also natural. It's also natural people would come on over Tank Bigsby. I know, at least from our point of view, he was that guy that, like, we were seeing like freshman highlights of him.
Oh,
like,
his
he was
freshman year was
the
crazy.
First person like from that potential class to like show as like a true freshman. So, he's been on the radar for a while, but things
nonetheless
are subject to change, and he'll still be like a great prospect nonetheless.
It seems like at this point, being fourth best running back in the 2023 class would be first best most years. It's going to be another like 2017-esque class, I think, at running back. There's going to be a lot of guys that go really high. I think like Bijan Robinson could be like a top 5 pick. Like he's that kind of prospect. He's terrific. Let's talk. We keep trying to get to this quarterback carousel.
Do we have a main topic?
We do.
We can give about 90 seconds to each of these.
Well, we'll go through and I'll kind of talk through, as I mentioned up top. I think there's going to be a lot of movement at quarterback this off season. I think we've seen a lot of turnover the past couple of years, but this year is going to be no different than that. So I'm going to run through just where we see different teams and players that could be a bit on the move, plus some guys. So I'll run through that, and then we'll talk a little bit about the kind of larger, more holistic view of the quarterback carousel in 2022. So right now, of people that could be moving or returning, we have Jameis Winston on the Saints, the Broncos QB situation with Teddy Bridgewater, now their starter. The Pittsburgh Steelers with Ben Roethlisberger, who has been rumored to be calling it quits this offseason, so they could have an opening. The Panthers right now have Cam Newton and an injured Sam Darnold. So are they going to keep either of those? Or are they going to move on? Or are they going to find a new guy? Spoiler alert, they should not start either of those guys next year. Washington, who's been starting Taylor Heineke after the Ryan Fitzpatrick injury in week 1. The Texans right now have obviously the Deshaun Watson saga that'll play out this offseason, and Tyrod Taylor and Davis Mills, who have been playing for them this year, although I believe they just announced that Davis Mills will be starting the rest of the season for them. Green Bay has Aaron Rodgers, who obviously has asked for a trade from last offseason. Will that still be in play? We don't know. The Falcons, Matt Ryan, I think more and more has picked up on them possibly. They have a potential out, although they still have a decent amount of dead cap this offseason with him, but they do have a potential out where they could cut him in this offseason. Russell Wilson and the Seahawks, maybe he's on the move. We've talked about that before if he demands a trade. The Vikings and Kirk Cousins, who has 1 year left on his deal, but has a ridiculously high cap hit. I think it's $45 million this year, so he could be a trade candidate if they don't think that is worth the price of admission. The Browns are kind of in that middle ground with Baker Mayfield. Do they extend him? They haven't given him an extension yet, although he is under contract in 2022. 49ers, what happens with Jimmy G? He's under contract for another year. Do they trade him? Do they keep him? What happens there? The Dolphins, there's been a lot of rumors around Tua, although he's been playing better recently. The Giants with Daniel Jones. Obvious reasons there why they could be moving on, and the Lions with Jared Goff. So, looking around this ecosystem, and Jay, I'll start with you. Of these players that are out here that could possibly land as starters in other positions, who do you think is the best fantasy free agent, I'll say free agent and or player who could switch teams on the menu, setting aside Rodgers, Wilson, and Watson, which I think is just a complete separate conversation.
Setting aside the best ones, yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, obviously, Wilson and Rodgers.
Well, those are the best quarterback. Obviously, those are game changers. From a fantasy perspective, man, if you set aside those guys, man, if one of these guys landed in another spot, I don't know if it's any of the guys you mentioned here. I mean, obviously, I think two.
We can go off the board to the second chance candidates as well.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly am intrigued by Mariota. The biggest intrigue guy to me, just because I think he fits the mold of maybe a Tannehill track. I just think there's fantasy goodness there, where if he gets an opportunity, you could get some rushing.
That upside, the kind of Jalen Hurts type upside is there.
Yeah, it's just he wasn't and even he wasn't as inaccurate as some of these other guys. I think if he gets a second chance, that's a guy who could produce, and I don't know what scale, but it could be definitely a viable, particularly in Superflex guy. I think he would be a high end too, if he started for a team, just for that rushing floor that he should be able to produce with his legs there. Outside of him, a lot of these guys are not guys I'm super interested in. You want to talk about Minshew? I actually don't. I think Minshew can be a. He threw up the Minshew over Herbert tag again. But Minshew's actually a guy who could be the high. I mean, Tyler Heineke's been successful from a fantasy perspective in Superflex this year. I don't think Minshew's that different than that. If you can have some success there, I actually think Minshew should start for someone next year, depending on how all of this stuff shakes out. And
get him to Carolina.
Sure. I just think he could be a bridge.
Carolina in my mind.
He's a high end.
Don't apologize.
In my mind, I'm going.
I didn't say keep going.
Dad gets that. No, I don't know if anybody else listening to that gets.
Dad, put the next lyric in the chat.
He will.
We'll wait.
He will.
We'll wait. Silence, everybody. Sorry, Jay. Go on.
Perfect for
silence.
Podcast. Just
let's have
a minute of silence.
Bring back my girls. Anyways, go on, Jay.
Well, let's talk about Urban Meyer uninterrupted for 10 minutes.
Fire, Urban! Fire!
Anyway. Minshew maybe starts or something. I don't know. He's he could be a back end. He should start. He's a good stopgap. Teddy. We look at these guys who are kind of bridging the gap. You got Teddy B this year. I mean, Minshew kind of falls right into that realm where that's a guy who can start for a year or two. He's probably a little bit more intriguing for fantasy in some ways than Teddy B, who's super safe. I feel like Minshew's a little dangerous, where it's he could probably get you a higher ceiling of fantasy points.
Work it out, Josh.
There it is. There's the lyric.
Don't you
love
it.
But I mean, you look at some of these other potential is it interesting to see a Teddy B go somewhere? Do we really want to see a second chance from a Drew Lock or a Mitch
I don't really want to see Teddy B go anywhere.
Gardner Minshew's got that dirt on him. I don't know.
He did.
He's an it guy.
He did put up. So I mean, I just it's interesting because I feel
it's a Heineke. He's almost the same guy.
Yeah,
they're
the same guy. They're a bit of a gunslinger.
Can run a little bit. They could scramble a tiny bit. It's basically street ball. You're just
it's enough where they'll make some weird mistakes where you're just what was that? But they'll still kind of get it done.
Yeah, they're the ideal quarterback when you're playing 7-on-7 in Madden. That's what they are.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, he's on there. I mean, I agree.
I mean, Cousins was another one. If he moves, like, I think he'll still be what he is.
That's why I don't even sit, because people like Matt Ryan and Kirk Cousins, like, I know we have them on this
Matt
list.
Ryan's slightly
or Baker
washed,
Mayfield. Like, I'm not sure they'll leave. I think it's more likely they'll stay, so I'm not even really considering them in my mind. But
yeah,
right, but
Matt
out of all those guys,
interesting.
Mariota's the one that like would be a new name on the landscape. I think he fits the bill of like a guy who's you're not starting now. A shakeup happens. That's a guy I think that actually like can move the needle and be like a starter for a team, particularly in Superflex. Where a lot of these other guys are just bridge quarterbacks that like like streaming probably even in Superflex.
Bridgewater has bridge in his name. Like,
yes, he literally is like
so on the
it's
nose.
his destiny. That's perfect. Yeah, everybody else is slightly washed, or like you didn't let me say the guys that are real impact players, like Wilson, Rodgers, and Watson. Wherever they end up, that's huge.
I mean, obviously we've
they're
talked a lot
the
about,
same guy.
We've talked about
regardless.
Rodgers and Wilson and Deshaun Watson. We're just not touching at this point, just because we don't know, and that's obviously
It's just like it's because I prepared a lot of things to say about them in here.
Well, like
really
they're the
tying
most
my
important
hands
ones for like other.
They
topics.
are. They're the dominoes that are gonna drop, and we can talk. I mean, Deshaun Watson is this whole other separate can of worms, but Russell and Aaron Rodgers, I think we have there's a pretty decent idea around where they could
go.
They'll be
the logjam of nothing else will happen. I feel like till they
exactly.
Like they're the
that's
key.
That's what I think as well. And we already had that list from Russell Wilson where we know he put the Dallas Cowboys. That's not going to happen. He put the Chicago Bears. That's not going to happen. No. It was Las Vegas and the Saints were the other two on there. Those are the two that make sense.
Yeah.
Saints make a lot of sense, but they need to figure out the cap situation real quick because they're caps.
Well, they kind of went all in a bit. Yeah. Yeah, it didn't, totally.
They did. It did not
Paying
work.
Simeon, right?
Let's flip the script a little bit and looking at some of these teams who could be looking for a new player or switching things up. And Andrew, I'll throw this to you. What landing spot is kind of what you see as the most desirable for a quarterback upgrade, hopefully, whether that's a free agent or a draft pick? What's the landing spot that you like the best?
Now, do you mean an upgrade for that quarterback or just the people around him?
For that team, exactly.
Yeah,
so where is the best fantasy landing spot for anyone who happens to come there?
I really like the Broncos are kind of like the first one that comes to mind. And maybe that's just because we've heard like those sort of like musings of a Rodgers going there. And we kind of like the talent of having like a Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, Noah Fant, even Tim Patrick in there. I'm also seeing coming into the chat there. Yes, if Ben Roethlisberger retires, I think Pittsburgh's probably like the outright best, but yeah, again,
is it though that offense? I know their skill positions are great, but they need to figure out that offensive line.
O-line. Yeah,
don't you lean? I lean Denver.
Yeah, I like
Those
Denver. That's why I brought them up. But I'm hoping that like if we're saying one of these free agents or players ends up in Pittsburgh, I'm also kind of hoping that I have to imagine that they're looking to address that O-line in the draft or in I'm not sure who will be O-line free agency picks, but like you got to look at the way things have gone with that team and the way like I mean Najee's been good this season, but like efficiency's probably been one of the more troubling things for him. Like he's kind of surviving by volume alone, and you'd love to see what he could do if he had like an O-line that gave him a break every once in a while.
I guess it is.
Are you reading?
I am reading a little bit this new comment that came in.
Yes.
It seems urgent. So we'll bring it up to Fraggy. Sure. Help start 2 round 1 plus. So basically you've got Eckler, Monty, Fournette, Connor, Mark Andrews, and Gronk. Who do I start and who do I flex? 1 flex spot, full PPR. Well, I mean,
a lot of good players. So that's good.
So obviously we talked about injuries to Connor, Andrews, and Andrews. If you have to start,
like a must start.
Eckler's a must start. Honestly, I think like if you're talking about the odd man out, it's Montgomery. At this point, like Eckler's a must start. Fournette is a must start.
So is Andrews. So
Connor, if he's healthy, is a must start, I think, and Andrews as well is a must start. I think Gronk's also great. You can't go wrong with that either. But I mean, I would take Andrews over Gronk if that's your choice between it. Yeah. So I mean, like I guess those two. Obviously, with tight end, it's a little different, but. Yeah, Eckler, then Fournette.
Well, I'd be shocked if you weren't starting Andrews or Gronk in your tight end spot. If they're like, "Oh, I've got another type cut."
I mean, I guess if you have Kittle, yeah, we also
that is a good matchup, but you also have real stud running backs there.
Yeah, Eckler and Fournette have been so good. I mean, I think there's a possibility James Conner is out this next week, so I think that might. Force an answer on you.
Yeah, you're probably flexing Monty, like so.
If James Conner is hurt,
how are you not the number 1 seed? You got Renfro too. I mean,
what?
Come on,
Braggy. I feel like you're just bragging here. Like, man, your team's good. I mean, Renfro's obviously earlier in this show. Renfro's been the wide receiver 3 since week 9.
Yeah.
Like he's been
down
terrific.
The stretch, he's been a top wide receiver.
Obviously, Gronk has still been very good. James Conner's been honestly.
I would do Renfro safer than Gronk. I would
Renfro safer than Gronk as well for the volume, particularly if it's not in tight end premium and those things. But like honestly, Fraggy, you're good. You're gonna be fine. They have a lot of good players.
None of those players, I'm like, yeah, that's gross. Like, those are all
no, those are all really good. You get a good team. That's great. Let's see.
Now he's just flexing.
What are your quarterbacks? Brady, Pittman, Herbert, and
start 2. You start Waddle and you start Renfro. It's pretty clear on that. After that, it's Pittman and Higgins. Smith is the clear 5th.
They're all
out of that group. But I would start. I mean, Waddle and Renfro have been terrific since start. But Higgins has also been really good. So again. You're good. You're gonna win.
These are also for another plug. Questions to forward to the collective sit starts every
exactly
Sunday morning.
Oh, get the fuck out of here, Fraggy. You're out of here. Herbert hurts. Get the fuck out of here.
I love it. That's a good job. I love all those players. I mean,
your team's great. Congratulations. Enjoy your championship, Fraggy.
I forgot to have Kittle too.
Does he have Cup too? Seems pretty good. He's like, who do I start? Debo, Cup. If it's super flex, Fraggy, you're starting both.
He's like,
I mean, that's a good team. I mean, he's missing Cup, Debo, Jonathan Taylor. So maybe that's probably what the number 1 the team he's playing has, or someone good. But I don't know.
It's just a clash of the Titans.
Oh god, that's funny.
I love it. Good team. I like it.
Yeah,
let's go back
good
to
players.
Quarterbacks.
So yeah, Pittsburgh,
Herbert and Hurts just got me at that point. Get the fuck out of here. Oh man.
So anyway. Yeah, Pittsburgh, Denver, good spots. Yeah,
good spots.
Good spots.
Yeah.
Let's look at a few of these positions. I mean, I want to actually focus in on Carolina a little bit. Not to sing the song, but we have DJ Moore, possibly CMC when he's healthy. You have a lot of
landing spot.
You have a lot of. Well, yeah, I know exactly.
After Teddy, then Sam Darnold went there, and
but even if not for the sake of. Even if not for the sake of a quarterback, I think you have a lot of stake in high quality fantasy players on that team in general. So like, what is an ideal, like QB landing spot, QB to land in that system? Jay, I'll throw that to you first.
And that's it. Oh man, for Carolina, I don't know. I would be like a great Russell Wilson spot, even though that's not on.
That's where he wants to go, right? That's like
not
last on his list.
That's a great Watson spot too. Like I'm just thinking, maybe just because it's like Cam was on that team, and I'm thinking of like a guy who
has some rushing
quarterback.
upside.
Yeah, like that's probably what Mariota. That would be
Mariota
great for him too. I just because it seems like it works there on that particular team, just from past quarterbacks. So that's kind of what stands out to me. They're a real interesting one because I really do like their skill position players because they have DJ Moore and obviously CMC have had good offensive players there, and you saw a little bit of success with Sam Darnold this year before that went off the rails. So honestly, you'd love to see some of those higher end ones. Outside of that, though, they seem like a team that needs to bridge the gap, and get by. Until they can draft a guy, maybe they're a future team that could draft a quarterback. But I'm really looking at those guys with rushing upside.
Yeah.
They seem like they could really thrive in that system.
This is a very important comment we need to get from
all my friends.
from our friend Andrew Hayes.
Andrew, I thought we were friends.
What are you drinking, Andrew?
Andrew, what are you drinking tonight?
Is he drinking Makers again?
Yeah. No, that bottle's long since finished.
He's just mad because I think we're in one league and I think I'm the number 1 seed, so I do suck.
Let's yeah. Well, yeah, you kind of suck. It's pretty clear.
My team's a fraud team in that league, but
let's any other points on quarterbacks you want to I guess this is one last question I want to put out there. What do you think are the most likely teams? Obviously, I think most people are talking about that there's not really a top 10 pick for QB in this year's draft. So it kind of makes we're kind of up in the air in terms of which teams draft a QB. What teams do you think are most likely to draft their next QB versus finding one of these free agents?
Ooh.
I think the
what
Texans
is the draft order right now. It's like
definitely
we're looking at the Lions at the top, but I mean I don't know what they're looking to do after Goff right now. But
I think the Lions would be.
They're not going to be taking with the number 1 pick though.
Well, but they could be number 2. This class is so weird because like it's going to be deep, but like no top guy. So I think any team with capital in the. I would say you're better off farther back, but you know how these guys climb too, and all of a sudden the pressure mounts.
Well, they climb, and there's also like on the back end, the people trading back up to get that 5th-year option is another thing.
Right.
Entirely.
So I think you could see the Texans, Lions, Steelers, those types of teams, Falcons, teams with either the ones that are completely in flux, like the Lions and Texans even more than the Lions, or the ones where you have the older quarterback potentially on the way out, whether it's retirement or potentially moving on or eventually retiring. I think like Steelers and Falcons make sense the most because they have those kind of aging guys or guys on the way out potentially. So and they'll have farther picks. Well, Falcons will be a little bit higher, but they'll have picks in the mix where it makes a little bit more sense, where they could potentially invest that
particularly for the Falcons, because they have, regardless of whether if they move on from Matt Ryan, they still have a lot of dead cap from him, so they almost have to go cheap at quarterback, which means either
they'll bridge it with like one of these guys
bringing in a guy
Bridgewater and
a guy that's like 1 year $4 million.
Yeah,
like
and they'll draft a guy like too. Yeah, I think that team
an Andy Dalton, like something like that has to be in the case because they're going to be pretty cash strapped down in the Falcons if they move on from Matt Ryan.
Sure, and I think that ESPN's article, which got the juices flowing for the segment, was they had him that was where they suggested it. It makes sense for him to move. Like, just to see like where that team kind of went. It kind of makes sense for him to have like one last stop on another team with
it does make
change
sense.
of scenery. He's been there his whole career. It's like see him play 2 years for
and they
Pittsburgh.
had
I think they suggested Pittsburgh, which actually kind of makes sense.
It does make a lot of sense, and I think that's an upgrade for all the skill position players in Pittsburgh, from Ben Roethlisberger to Matt Ryan at this point in their careers. It's still not, obviously I think it's a stopgap measure for Pittsburgh. For Pittsburgh, I think that would really be like, Pittsburgh is like, we got to look in the mirror and think, if we can compete next year, we sign a guy like Matt Ryan, a guy who's been to a Super Bowl before, is a veteran who can fit into the system, and then we can spend our draft capital on O-line. Maybe that is a formula that gets Pittsburgh back into real contention. It might, honestly. They've got great skill position players. If they fix that O-line and they get their defense healthy, they could be a good team. Like, that could be a situation. I think I saw I think it was like Todd McShay released his 1.0 mock draft this year, and he had Kenny Pickett going there. And that's a very like Mac Jones-ish situation where you're asking a QB not to lose the game for you, where it could be a really good situation around them to make something worse. So like, I like the idea of like Pittsburgh being a team that's like still competing next year and trying to bring in a player to suit that.
They're only 6-1 this year, and they're not a disaster, but they're not great this year.
They've had a lot of injuries.
They're still 6-1, and they have skill. Like, it's just sort of like a weird year. And Ben's had games where it just seems like he can't do anything, and then sometimes he kind of can. I don't know. It's just really.
It does feel like it does feel like for a fantasy implications, I love it more if like a veteran stepped in there as opposed to developing. Someone, it is possible for a draft pick to come in, a la Mac Jones, as you've mentioned, who the Patriots are, at the top of the AFC, with Mac Jones at the helm. So the team itself is doing well, and you can compete bringing in a rookie with good coaching. I think Mike Tomlin's probably one of the better coaches around.
He's one of the 5 best coaches.
Well, it's a stable system too. That's the best part.
It's a good
like
system,
stable organization.
great system and organization for a rookie to come into. But at the same time, for fantasy implications, it's not like Mac Jones is making top receivers or. I don't know. Maybe that'll help Najee, because they'll lean on the run game that much more once they improve that O line. But it's not impossible. So I could see Pittsburgh going either way. I think both paths is viable for them. Either bringing in a veteran like a Matt Ryan if he leaves Atlanta, or one of the other guys like Jimmy G.
We've talked about that before.
I think
that would be a trade, of course.
Another guy who's been there, maybe like a little less or so in like the ability, but like that guy maybe stabilizes the fantasy assets. But then, I could also imagine them bringing in one of the QBs from this and being successful with them. So I just think the difference will be maybe the receiver output. If they decide to go more conservative with developing a new guy.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because I do think that that's not a team that I think is going to rebuild in the traditional sense. So it does make
soft rebuild at best.
Yeah. Although at some point, there is such a value to teams that hit on a rookie QB because of the money it saves you, because those guys make you get them at such a premium in terms of what it allows you to do with the rest of your roster. So it does make sense. Although I just don't know if this is the draft to necessarily go in on a guy if you're Pittsburgh, particularly when it's a really good draft for linemen, for offensive linemen, and they could really fix that problem for them. Yeah. And I think it's going to be an attractive landing spot to a lot of free agents out there, whether that be
which does lean
Ryan
towards the gap argument. So
yeah, exactly. Even like a Teddy Bridgewater there, I feel like they would be more comfortable with, although it's not ideal. And just seeing where that gets them. But let's move on. I think obviously this will shake itself out, and we'll see how this goes. I'm really interested to see how this draft lands with some of these quarterbacks, because it's just a weird draft. It's going to be a weird offseason, I think. I feel like I've had such a better sense of how the offseason was going to play out in the past few years, whether with the draft and with with quarterbacks and free agency. This year, I think it's just kind of wild. Like even last year, like we had a pretty good idea who was drafting quarterbacks and some of the free agency stuff. Like I think like Matthew Stafford was like the biggest shock of the offseason, although I think we originally said when Matthew Stafford asked for a trade, I think initially we were like, the Rams make sense, right? And I think that was something that came up early on for us. But even still, that was the biggest shock. Wentz was not a shock. All of the landing spots for quarterback were not really a shock. So this offseason, I'm baffled. I'm bewildered. I'm befuddled. And I'm going to Carolina in my mind. Let's talk about, before we close up tonight, I just want to revisit, we're kind of getting in, we have 4 games left in the NFL season for all the teams. Right now we're in the home stretch for some playoff predictions. Let's talk a little bit about what we think going down the stretch, who we think is going to make the playoffs. So obviously let's start with the AFC. I think the Patriots are pretty locked in. Tennessee's pretty locked in. Kansas City's pretty locked in. After that, though, like Baltimore Ravens, do they hold on?
I don't know. Cleveland making the push there, and
Cleveland. That's who you went to. I would have said.
Chargers, I like.
Chargers are right now 5th. They have the season. I think I lock in the Chargers. I like that. After that, right now it's Indianapolis and the Buffalo Bills at 7-6, both of them. Cleveland Browns at 7-6, Cincinnati at 7-6, Denver Broncos at 7-6, and then the Pittsburgh Steelers at 6-1. So I think that's really who's in it. Like, who wraps up those final 2 wild card spots?
I kind of like the Colts. I think them and Buffalo. Those would be my 2 picks, I think, off the top of my head. I think those are the 2 best teams, like overall, out of those. Even though Buffalo can't run the ball, they have Josh Allen. And then Colts are still pretty like well-rounded team. Like they can run, obviously, with Taylor. And that really helps everything else go. Wentz doesn't have to do too much. That defense isn't that bad. So I like those teams like rounding out beyond the Chargers. Yeah, I don't know if Ravens hold on, though. You might be able to swap them out to Browns or Bengals, honestly, because I don't think that's a guarantee Ravens. So.
Yeah, I was going to say, of the teams that are in the playoff spots right now, I think the Bills are probably a lock. After that, I would say the Bengals, I think, are the most next likely for me, because I think they could either get that next wild card spot or overtake the Ravens.
Sure, I guess they have 2 paths. I guess anybody in that division has 2 paths. Just because the Ravens are
so many injuries.
It's just a lot. It's a lot there, especially if Lamar is. It depends how bad that is. You know, it's going to be tough to tell. Like if it really hampers his running, like even if he plays, just changes that whole team if he can't move. So I don't know. They could lose that to either of those teams. The Bengals, it depends on the week. They look like they can beat anyone some weeks, and some weeks they're losing to the Jets. So I'm not sure with that team, but they are the Bengals.
It looks like a lot of divisional kind of matchups like down the stretch for that particular. So they'll all sort of be able to have their fate in their own hands, so to speak.
Yeah.
I think matchup between Cincinnati and the Ravens. There'll be Cincinnati versus the Browns. Matches against the Steelers. It's really sort of locked up. So, hey, just win out and you might be able to take it. But I think a couple of teams, both the Ravens and the Browns, have a tough matchup against Green Bay as well, which could make things
pretty
a
rough.
little murkier for them.
Here's another question from Andrew here on the chat. Given the bottom of both divisions and the presumptive in the hunters, such as Indy, Washington football team, Atlanta, etc., are we calling the playoff extension to 17 a success, or is it poor? It's interesting because I think at least in this year, I think that the AFC is probably a good thing because there's so many teams that I think are like pretty decent teams that are in the hunt. It's a different situation in the NFC though.
NFC is
because we basically have I want to say you like the top 6. It's really that 7th spot that's going to be like a shit bag.
Bad
because now you have like Arizona, Los Angeles, and San Francisco all in playoff spots in that team, and I think those are all pretty good teams. And that's 6. But that's like Washington, Minnesota, the Eagles, Atlanta. I think it's actually more likely, and this is why I like the 7th playoff team, I think it's more likely that you end up with one division that has a shitty
that's usually what happens, right?
Where you have, because that was the case last year, where I think it was Washington made it at 7-9, wasn't it? Into the playoffs
a few times.
So like a division winner is there where you have another stacked division like we have in the AFC West, and to a lesser extent the NFC West, and to a lesser extent the AFC West this year. Also, I mean, I guess Miami is kind of coming on strong. So the parity doesn't necessarily cross divisions, but in terms of conferences, kind of like having the 7th team, because I feel like there's always one team that gets screwed with like a division winner who sucks. So like I kind of prefer it. I think there's almost like, and to bring up the next contract from Andrew, you do have a near guaranteed subpar team. That I think that's going to happen every year regardless. I think it's just more likely to come from one of the division winners than it is to come from the wild card spots.
It has been more of the theme has been like the bad division winner, but yeah, I would say like you look at the AFC this year, it's really a lot of probably more, not mediocre, but like slightly above mediocre teams. Like you got a big mix, because even Miami, like you just said, they're not bad. They're kind of coming on. They're not 7-6, but I mean they beat
1-5 straight
above them. Yeah, that's like they might be the 6th best team over there, and they're going to get a chance. And like none of those other teams are necessarily like awful. They're not necessarily great either. And then the NFC, you have more of a top heavy thing where it kind of falls off right at 7, where it's a little more glaring. It's like, oh, we're going to get a Washington or Minnesota or Eagles, where it's like they don't seem to like, none of them seem to want to make the playoffs. They're like losing key games and stuff like that. It's
true, but theoretically, like, isn't it still a success? Because if that happens and it's top heavy, you still are technically getting the 7 best teams.
It's true.
Mix. Whereas
I'm fine with it. I don't really,
I think it's fun because it's like, even if it seems like it's not working, it is sort of working because it is still the 7 best teams, and it maybe sort of adds a little more balance to wash out like when that outlier wins their division.
I do like that one team gets the bye.
I was just gonna say
that part, because you have to keep playing, like, because there's only one, unless one team like totally took it like early, which is not really the case this year. So it's very wide open for that one spot, because you got 3 teams tied in the AFC. You got 4 teams tied at 10-3, which is pretty wild. 3 teams tied. But that's pretty good. 3 teams at 10-3 in the NFC. So it's no one has that locked up. So that's going to be played out probably to the last week, most likely.
Yeah, it's interesting with the playoffs this year. I think it was like me and Kimes had a tweet where it was like preseason we were all on KC and Tampa Bay rematch. Season starts,
Maybe not. And now everyone's back on KC versus Tampa Bay.
Definitely possible. The third seed and the 2 seed, and honestly, both playing well. So winners of 4 straight, and what was KC's streak at right now? 6. So
they're pretty good. I mean, if you think honestly, if I'm gonna place money on who I think is most likely to repeat in the Super Bowl, I would probably say Tampa Bay. Because Kansas City seems to only get their offense out against the Raiders, but I think it's still up in the air because it's like,
I'd say
what team are you?
Tougher teams to play though. I feel like that's a tougher.
Well,
road.
Green Bay and Arizona. Green Bay's really good. I think Green Bay's probably the toughest competition.
Rams are not fun either. Like Rams are still. I mean, they beat Tampa Bay handily.
Yeah.
So.
I think there's 4 I think there's 4 teams: Green Bay, Tampa Bay, Arizona, and Los Angeles. I'm like, okay, I think those are top heavy. And when it comes down to the AFC, Patriots New England, Tennessee, Kansas City, Baltimore, Chargers, Indy, Buffalo, now, all of those teams, I'm like, yeah, all of those teams I think could win the Super Bowl. All of those teams could also lose to any of the other teams on there. It's not as clear cut where I think like the top teams I think are probably on par stronger in the NFC, but like there's just a lot of good teams in the AFC, but not great.
Wide open.
Wide open.
Because it's like right now, the New England Patriots have the number 1 seed, but let's be honest, do we honestly want to bet on them winning the Super Bowl with a rookie quarterback? That's never happened before.
That's where the smart money is.
It's just like, given the way their team is built, it's a good defense, good running game, but like in the playoffs, like your quarterback has to do something like to win a game. You're going to have to rely on Mac Jones at a part, and it's not that Mac Jones couldn't do it eventually. He's a rookie. It's unfair to expect him to come into that. That's just going to be like, that's the thing that should make you scared. And then it's just like, Tennessee, is Derrick Henry healthy? Does he come back and play in the
Heard rumblings he does. That could be a game
They have
changer.
a shot if that happens. Yes.
Yeah, they do. They do have a shot if that happens. It's like, honestly, like, I don't know. I'm putting all my money on Los Angeles Chargers. Bolt up, baby. They're making the Super Bowl.
There we go.
Well, you heard it here first.
MVP and Super Bowl champ Justin Herbert.
Yeah, I Super Bowl MVP, and the ring as well.
Give them all.
Give them all of it. Offensive Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year. It's gonna happen. Justin Herbert. Let's close it up. We're way over time.
All right, bye.
That's it for today's episode of the Brothers of Dynasty live stream edition. And thanks to all of you as well listening to the podcast edition on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening. Be sure to subscribe on those platforms or hit subscribe if you're listening on YouTube right now. I'm your host, Josh Christensen, and a big thank you to both of my brothers, Jay and Andrew. Thank you, Jay!
Thanks, Josh! Find me! I'm not going to do that voice the whole time. You can find me at JC_DFF on Twitter. Also, check out Fantasy Cheat Sheet on the Going for Two Live podcast network this Friday, our last show of this season. That will be at 8:30 Friday night, so check that out.
And thank you, Andrew.
It's sad to hear that that's the last show of the season. Definitely really enjoy the Going for Two Live Fantasy Cheat Sheet. But find me at Drewsy_music, possibly commenting in the stream for the Going for Two live stream of the Fantasy Cheat Sheet. Or more appropriately, you can find music from me, music like the theme music to this, Hired Guns from my band Ghosts in the Snow. Go to ghostinthesnow.com to find the links to the socials like Facebook and Instagram, or links to the streaming sites like Spotify, Bandcamp, Apple Music. You got it.
And you can find me at DFFJChris on Twitter. Remember to subscribe to our Facebook page, Brothers of Dynasty, and follow us on Twitter at Bros of Dynasty. And tune in next week when we'll be back with some more reactions to Week 15 and more Dynasty fantasy football topics. So until then, thanks for listening and have a good week. And good luck in the playoffs, everybody. Hope you win. Unless you don't.
Get yourself a championship.
Yay! Bye-bye. Have fun.